Pokemon has a number of ways to throw the odds of victory in a battle out the window. Critical hits, secondary effects, status conditions, an abundance of ludicrous mechanics, and sometimes even the actual software just gives out on us. In official competitions, the game can have an unbiased ruthlessness, almost akin to an art form. I believe that one of the most ruthless elements of the game, something I'm sure anyone who's ever booted up an entry in the franchise has experience with, is accuracy. Have you ever whiffed a 90% accurate move at the worst possible moment? That's a rhetorical question, because we all have. Whether you're getting swept by Cynthia's Garchomp in the mainline story, playing a singles match, a doubles match, speed running, I'm sure even Nuzlockers have been at the mercy of a miss. As a veteran doubles player, I know almost too well that missing a crucial move can cost you more than just a game. It can cost you a full match, prize money, and in the worst cases, it can end your entire tournament run. Over the course of my career, I've been gradually learning the value of consistency in the teams I build. And while I prefer strategies that don't even have a chance to miss, I can't always avoid using moves with an accuracy below 100%. Over time, I noticed I developed a genuine bias. I would neglect even considering specific Pokemon entirely just because of the accuracy of their most viable move slots. And that bias felt like a weakness. I wanted to get rid of it. But defeating a bias isn't really that simple, and as I would soon learn, some habits are really hard to beat. The problem with this one is that not all inaccurate moves are created equally, because in Pokemon, accuracy is not what we think it is, and I came up with a plan to prove it. So there's this common phrase thrown around in the Pokésphere when discussing moves that miss. If it isn't 100%, it's 50. It either hits or it doesn't. Now anyone familiar with how probability works could easily disprove this. It's more of a facetious mantra, and I'm not planning to support that claim. But the sentiment behind those words is important. It's uniquely derived from how Pokemon battles play out. Missing a 90% accurate move can be a death sentence as early as the first turn of a game, and missing multiple moves can alter the time-space continuum. We literally live in the singular timeline where Cybertron is not a world finalist or potential world champion. In my headcanon, he is the 2013 world champ. Some moves can really feel like they actually only have a 50% chance to connect. And sometimes Game Freak even throws us a bone and buffs them, like they did with Will-O-Wisp, but that's super rare, and there's some moves that have no room for any type of buff, because they're already 90 or 95% accurate, even if they don't feel that secure. That feeling is what we're here to discuss. Before we put any tinfoil hats on, we need to talk some pseudo-psychology. What do I mean when I say that not all inaccurate moves are created equally? Well, the best way I can explain this is vibes. Some moves with the same chance to hit don't feel like they have the same chance to hit. Draco Meteor, Stone Edge, Hydro Pump, these are all moves I'd do anything short of unplugging my Switch to avoid relying on in a tournament match. But again, to reiterate, these moves do not all have an equivalent degree of inaccuracy, because for each, a miss would have a measurably different impact. And while yes, there's a bunch of variables that factor into how accurate something feels, like power, secondary bonuses, and bulk, I still wish I could delete Chi-Yu from the game, because I hate it. One move in particular has been so unreliable for me that I genuinely began to question whether it was coded correctly. That move? Play rough. Now, trust me, I know it seems ridiculous. The game is coded to do an accuracy check on the move, and the accuracy is clearly listed as 90%. How could it be coded wrong? Well, unless someone has access to the code themselves, how could we know it was coded right?
Wow, I can't find a flaw in his logic.
I stubbornly began to develop an anecdotally fueled theory. Play rough is actually coded to be 85% accurate, and the move's accuracy score, which is what we see when we look at the move's summary, is bugged. But why play rough? Well, in 2017, I almost missed my Worlds invite because of play rough. In 2022, I literally did miss my Worlds invite, not just because of a play rough miss, but because of two separate play rough misses at two different events. Anytime I revisit a strategy that would benefit from strong physical fairy coverage, I'm basically forced into one option, and always quickly reminded of why I don't trust this move. Back in 2020, I built a team with my friends Wolfglick and Aaron Trailer, and we were so confident that this team could win, we all came up with a celebration stream idea. Aaron ended up winning the event, and as a result we did a 24-hour mark hunting stream, and the next regional we built a team for had a Mimikyu on it. And even though Dynamax allowed me to circumvent potential opportunities to miss play rough, I still lost a crucial round to that 10% chance, bubbling out of the final bracket and losing the opportunity to win the event as a result. When I finally won my first regional in 2023, play rough nowhere to be found on that team, my celebration stream idea at the recommendation of Aaron was to physically test my most hated move's accuracy, play rough. And so I came up with an experiment. I would record myself clicking a statistically significant amount of play roughs, and see if my theory had any merit. Now, hypothetically, I could have had someone hack the game, rip the code, and then run the simulation on a computer, but I didn't even know if that was possible, and I chose to not even entertain that idea, because competitors in Pokemon are held to really high standards of conduct, and I avoid anything that could annoy the Pikachus in Italian suits. So in order to do an experiment on RNG-based mechanics without access to the code to simulate things, you have to unfortunately create a large sample size by yourself. I can explain. Let's say you have a fair 6-sided dice and either a ton of free time or a gambling problem. You throw that dice 1,000 times and record the number that it lands on each time. Since the dice are fair, they have an equal probability to land on each of the 6 numbers. By the end of the experiment, you'd expect to tally up a roughly equal amount of each of the 6 possible outcomes. If on the other hand, you find that the dice lands on a specific number much more often than the rest, you might have a case to suggest that the dice are loaded in favor of the number it tends to land on. The exact same fairness test can be applied to a move in Pokemon with an accuracy less than 100%. In this case, with Play Rough being 90% accurate, if you work out the math, clicking Play Rough 1,000 times, you would usually expect it to hit anywhere between 880 and 920 times. Furthermore, like with the dice example, the likelihood of it hitting any less than 870 out of 1,000 times would be extremely unlikely if it were actually programmed correctly to be 90% accurate. And if that were to happen, then there would be precedent to recreate this experiment, where any type of similar test results would all but force Game Freak to check the game's code for a legitimate bug. In order to test the move's accuracy, 1,000 attempts would be my sample size, and I'd be shooting for the nigh impossible miss count of 130. If I missed more than 120, it would still be pretty suspicious, but even 115 misses is still a bit sketchy, and if anybody could miss at least 115 play roughs, surely I had the potential. Now that I knew what I needed to do, I had to figure out how to pull this off. I thought about a few options, and truthfully it isn't the most difficult experiment to set up, if you have a ton of time on your hands, but me, I don't have a ton of time on my hands. What I was looking for was the fastest way to click Play Rough 1,000 times in one sitting, mostly just to be efficient, but also because I only have one copy of the game, which meant I would need a partner to do this with. And while I do have some truly amazing friends, there's a limit to what I can ask for with stuff like this. Spending 6 hours simulating the Pokemon equivalent of watching paint dry is well beyond that limit. Sort of as a side effect, I kind of created the world's most boring speedrun category. 1,000 Play Rough attempts, any percent. My first job was to see how long it took just to click Play Rough on each side. The move animations themselves are an unavoidable factor to consider, since Generation 9 removed the ability to turn them off, and Play Rough's animation takes roughly 3.5 seconds. Additionally, the process of selecting the moves would take around 3 to 4 seconds on average. So in a single battle, clicking Play Rough 4 times would take nearly 2 seconds longer than double battle would. Over the course of 250 cycles of this, that's like a minimum of 10 minutes time saved at least. However, Pokemon's battle modes all have a built-in 20-minute timer. Even in perfect conditions, it would take 5, 6, maybe even more matches, and each instance of setting up the battle would be another several minutes wasted. Plus, Play Rough has limited PP, so at best we would only be squeezing out 16 attempts per Pokemon, then wasting time on switches. I wanted to make this process faster, so I researched a bit. Turns out, you can actually do up to 60-minute battles with the game's tournament creation feature. Now we could theoretically get this done in about 2 hour-long matches. But there's still a kicker. I only have 192 available Play Roughs to click per battle. It only has 16 PP. In theory, we could click up to around 500 plus per match with the time we get. How would I be able to get past the cap of 192? I had an idea. There's actually a way to give a Pokemon infinite PP, so long as it can learn the move Recycle. After using a berry, you can recycle it and use it again. And there just so happens to be a berry that restores PP when you run out, the Lepa Berry. Turns out there's exactly one Pokemon in the entire game that learns both Play Rough and Recycle, Klefki. Looking at its move pool also gave me another idea. Rather than targeting into itself for a time-wasted resisted hit text animation, I could attack into a Pokemon that's trying to stay alive, that doesn't resist Fairy-type attacks. Zamazenta just so happened to learn Play Rough and Iron Defense. And with Psych Up, we could copy the boosts to keep everything nice and tanky. Then for the last move slot, we could use Rest to heal back to full HP when we needed to. With the foundation set, the last 2 options for this experiment were pretty easy to decide on. Smeargle would allow me to utilize another Pokemon that can Play Rough, Recycle, and Psych Up without resisting Fairy typing. And then I added a max defense Palmont as security. If anything went wrong, we could Revival Blessing to bring something back in case it fainted. I crunched some numbers on paper, set everything up, created the rentals myself, and then announced a streaming event to use the opportunity to help my friend raise some money for a new PC. Everything was ready, and I was a man on a mission. Today was the day. Either I would uncover the biggest conspiracy in Pokemon since the Shadow nerf to critical hits, or I would improve one of my weaknesses as a competitor, conquering my deepest bias against my least favorite move in the game. But then I realized I made a huge mistake. In a mad scramble to get this experiment completed, I set up the tournament feature I mentioned earlier on the day of the test, and I found out the hard way you need to do this with a 24-hour buffer. This was basically the worst setback I could have asked for. We added a bunch of wasted time setting up multiple battles, increased our chances to disconnect, and worst of all made the counting process much harder. And as we soon learned, we are so horrible at counting. Throughout the stream, what I planned to keep track of was the total play rough connections, the amount of times we missed, where each attack is launched from, who it targeted, and as a bonus, every single critical hit. I did try to keep track of the attack drops, but both because of misses and the plan being to attack a substitute to avoid the attack drops, wasting extra time, the sample size for this wouldn't be nearly what we need.
Stream's off to a great start because I just broke a mirror, so we're not hitting a single play rough tonight.
So here's how it would go. To kick things off, on turns 1 through 3, Zamazenta would click Iron Defense and everything would launch Play Rough into it, including Gab's partner Pokemon Klefki, so we could have a sample of self-targeting accuracy too. On the 4th turn, Zama would set up a substitute while everything psyched up to copy the defense boosts. While healthy and behind a substitute, Zama would use Play Rough into Smeargle because it doesn't resist it. Whenever Zama's substitute broke, it would set it up again, and whenever its HP got too low, it would use Rest to heal, keeping our punching bag alive until it ran out of Play Roughs. For the first 100 times that we clicked Play Rough, we hit exactly 90. Gab sacrificed her mirror for nothing, and I started to get a little bit nervous about how this was going to play out. But in the next 100 that we clicked,
of course, mine's the first to miss. Let's go.
Miss.
Another one. My Klefki missed again. That's 2 in a row. Everybody else is side characters in my movie called Play Rough. Does not work for Justin Carries.
we hit 85.
No.
Sometimes even the actual software.
No. We disconnected.
So, what were the results? Well, at first we counted 894 connections, but Twitch chat is not the most reliable source for accurate counts, and I was still in denial. I believed that we had overlooked a few misses, so I rewatched the entire VOD, tallied up every single data point that I could, and then drew some conclusions about what actually went down. The first batch of play rough attempts resulted in 90, 85, 91, 92, and 92 connections. Even with the extremely low total of 85 hits in the dataset, we regressed to the mean for 450 connections out of 500, or exactly a 90% hit rate. The final batch of attempts showed us a different trend though. First, 84, then 89 and 91. But the law of large numbers continued to fight back. In our next 100 attempts, there was a spirit bomb of hits waiting for us. We connected 50 play roughs in a row, something I never expected to see in my lifetime. It was so absurd I checked it again because I couldn't believe it. But sure enough, we did hit 50 straight. And that batch ended with a hit total of 96. Thankfully, the last batch was ready to offset that outlier with only 87 hits, but the damage was done. The actual total, 897, roughly an 89.7% accuracy for the sample. Sure, we hit less than 900, but not nearly enough of these attacks missed for statistical significance. I couldn't even get close to the easier thresholds to hit like 120 or 115 misses. The counts on the critical hit total were around 39 out of 897, which is in line with the 1 in 24 chance for it to occur. As hopeful as I was that we would discover something incredible, that maybe I could feel validated I shouldn't have ever trusted this move, my theory had been proven wrong. Not only was the total basically spot on for where it was supposed to be, when I broke down the targeting for my Pokemon's attempts versus Gab's attempts, the data showed that I had connected 90.73% of my hits, where she only connected 88.44%. In the heat of the moment, under pressure, I was the one to fold. Yes, I'm actually blaming myself for this, and yes, I'm very disappointed. Maybe in retrospect this all seemed pretty pointless, but I really don't see it that way. Some players may have an easy time rolling the dice when their odds are high, but I've never been one of those players, and that can actually hold me back. The ways we exhaust our time when making decisions in this game is one of, if not the most important skills worth investing time into. And this little VGC side quest was a critical opportunity for me to learn. Biases exist, and in order to be well-rounded and make optimal plays under pressure, it's worth the time to explore my habits and how they might snowball into full-blown inefficiencies. In the future, the missing component of a team I'm in love with could be a play rough user. And if I don't even consider it as an option, I end up wasting time on an incomplete idea. I may even go as far as scrapping the team entirely if I have to rely on a move I hate using to make it work. And that's just more and more wasted time. So while I may not have broken the case open on a conspiracy, I'm okay with that. Instead, I now have one of the most robust pieces of battle-tested research ever done into the validity of move accuracy. I'm sure I'll have a reason to consider using Play Rough again someday, and when that day comes, I will be much more willing to give it a fair shake. Because as it turns out, Pokemon accuracy is in fact not a lie.